Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of AZ Security. My name is Dylan Paardenkoper. I'm a cloud security architect at IT Impressive, and today we have a new great topic. It's called the introduction of the agent identity fundamentals, inclusive the lessons learned. Together with Robbe, can you please introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone, or hi, everyone. My name is Robbe van den Daele. Glad to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's
Um,
awesome to have you here. We met on the MC to MC, and
yeah,
you had a great topic, and you were investigating agent identity. And I felt like, well, that is a great opportunity to have you on the show. So that's why I asked you. So thank you very much for being in the show.
yeah, very excited. It's a new thing. It's something that's changing very quickly. I think it's an interesting thing to talk about.
Yeah, it's very hot at the moment, right? With all the agents popping up everywhere.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy.
For everybody at home who is not familiar with the agent identity, Robert, can you explain what it is?
Yeah, I definitely can. I have a slide deck with me, so maybe let's share that one first. A little introduction slides for me as well here. So, like I said, my name is Robbe van den Daele. I'm a security consultant and SOC engineer at the Collective Consulting. I'm a Microsoft security MVP. I do some blogging at my own website, harvardbrothers.com. And Dinant already said, I'm one of the board members of MC2MC, a Belgian Microsoft community, where we let speakers talk about security, Azure, endpoint management, a whole lot of different topics. So in today's session, I wanted to talk about what is Microsoft Agent Identity, so the identity platform of AI agents, of course. I don't do a lot of disclaimers normally, but with this session I do because it is a fast changing topic. So everything that I say now might not be the case anymore a couple of months later or might have changed already. So this is purely built on what I know now and also my own opinion or how I think it works because sometimes since it is still a new product, it's not always clear how some things exactly work. But let's dive in. So, what is agent identity? As you see over here in this drawing from Microsoft, Agent ID is a solution in the Entra ID stack, which is basically a bundle of a couple of things. As you can see
Yes.
here in the middle, it's basically a identity platform for authentication, authorization, and a couple of SDKs for agent identities. So your AI agent identities. It supports a couple of protocols like Agent OAuth protocol, MCPs, etc. And then they also give you a couple of tools to protect, harden your agents, and also detect misuse of them. So we have conditional access, identity governance, network, and identity protection, for example. And these are basically all of the things I want to talk about today. So, as I noted down on this slide, it's an identity and a security framework basically built in Microsoft Entra ID specifically for AI agents. It supports both OAuth 2.0 and OIDC, so the typical authentication protocols that we know in the Entra ID stack already, but also MCP, agent to agent communication, and this is currently all under a preview program. And this is also why it changes so fastly. It's still in preview under the Frontier program, sorry. Um, but Microsoft recently announced that a lot of these things, which we'll be talking about, will be part of Agent 365, which will be the license when we go in GA eventually. So that's already a sneak peek. So what makes Agent ID? Agent ID basically. So like I said earlier, it's first of all an authentication service, which allows to issue tokens for agents. It allows for authentication and authorization. It's also a software development kit that they provide you. So they gave developers the tools to easily integrate their AI agents into the Microsoft Agent Identity platform. It's also an agent management tool, so a metadata store for administrators to discover agents, view agents, manage the agents, etc. We also have a security for AI stack. So those are a bunch of tools that can help you govern your agents, protect them, and also detect malicious agents or malicious abuse of the agents. So this was kind of the high level stuff. What is it, etc. And then I want to go into the four objects of an agent identity. What makes an agent identity in Entra ID? So the first thing we have here is an agent identity blueprint, and that's actually a template that serves as the foundation for authentication of your agent identities. So not only authentication, but also authorization. It's basically the blueprint of all of your agent identities that fall under it. The interesting thing about an agent identity blueprint is that it holds credentials and that it acquires tokens for your agent identities, which we will talk about later. The second object that is very important is the agent identity blueprint principle. It's basically a service principal object within your Microsoft Entra ID tenant, which represents the presence of that blueprint that I discussed earlier in your specific tenant. That might sound confusing now, but I have a drawing in a couple of slides that will show this even better. Then the third object that is really important is the agent identity, which is the primary identity of an AI agent. So the identity that the AI agent will effectively use. And it is used to authenticate and access resources. And the interesting thing here again is that this agent identity does not have credentials, so it does not have a password, it does not have a client secret or maybe a managed identity, but the credentials are always on the agent identity blueprint, and the agent identity gets the tokens from the blueprint.
Right.
And then the fourth object is an agent user account, which is an optional account. You don't have to use it, but it's a specific agent user account with a one-to-one relationship to an agent identity. So an agent user account can never exist without a related agent identity. The special thing with an agent user account is that it is used to access systems as a user. So for example, a Exchange online mailbox or a Teams channel, it's basically a user object in Entra ID as we know the user objects now, but it just has some special properties specifically for an agent. And this is basically how you can see it in a graphical overview. So we have an agent identity blueprint, which is the blueprint of agent identities you want to create later. And each of the tenants that exist in the world can actually decide, I want to use that blueprint. I want to use the agent identities for that specific service, for example. So my tenant might decide, hey, I want to use this agent blueprint, and then I get an agent identity blueprint principal within my tenant. And this is actually the principal that will then hold the credentials and do all of the stuff, the tokens exchange, for example, for everything that comes after it. This agent identity blueprint principle will eventually create agent identities in your environment. So each agent identity will be linked to an agent, an AI agent that might run in Copilot Studio, Microsoft Foundry, whatever. So the different tools where an agent can live, an AI agent can live. And if you want to, you can also create agent users, which are a one-to-one relationship with one agent identity. This is basically how you can see it in a structured way.
Okay.
There are a couple of legacy agent identities, and it's actually funny that I call them legacy here because it's actually just application registrations and enterprise applications and Entra ID as we know them already. But in the past, before Agent ID was a thing, AI agents just got an application principal to authenticate with, and we call those the legacy agent service principals. So those are just regular application server principals. And if you look at them at the Microsoft Robbe API, you will actually see that it's a service principal call. So like you see in the top here, but then in the tags view, you can see that it's actually an agent service principal, but in the legacy form. So I just wanted to add this here as well, because you will see in the next slides that there is a difference between agent identities, the newer form, and the old agent identities, which are application registrations. I talked about those agent identity blueprint principle things and the identities, agent identities, etc. And interesting to note here is that an agent identity blueprint principle will always be the service principle that creates agent identities. So let's say that I'm creating an AI agent in Microsoft Copilot Studio, for example. The moment that I create my AI agent, in the background, the agent identity blueprint principle of Copilot Studio will create an identity for me in my Microsoft identity Entra ID tenant. And the creation of those agent identities is actually done by a permission that blueprint has, for example, and it's called the Agent Identity Create as Manager permission in Entra ID. And this is one that is granted automatically. So every agent identity blueprint principle has the permissions to create agent identities that it governs. It can't be revoked. So you can't remove that permission from the identity. If you do not want to allow that principle to create identities anymore, you have to disable it, for example. That's the only option. Let's say that you need agent user accounts under your agent identity. Then you have to give that service principle, the blueprint principle, an extra permission, which is not granted by default, which is called agent ID user read.write identity parented by permission. This one can be revoked though. So that's just something I wanted to call out for the users. Once you start with the whole agent identity system and you want to create your own blueprint, etc., know that that blueprint principle only has the permissions to create agent identities by default. And if you need an agent user, you need to grant that permission yourself manually as an administrator before it can do that.
Good to know.
Yeah, it's something that it's mentioned very deeply somewhere in the docs, and if you spend half an hour of reading, then you eventually find it. So it's something I searched a long time for. There are a couple of agent OAuth flows. So eventually, when that agent identity that we're talking about wants to authenticate, it has a couple of flows it can do. And the first one is, for example, an interactive agent flow, which is also called the on behalf of flow. So in this case, an agent actually logs in on behalf of a user and uses the users their permissions to do things. So a delegated context, we call that. In this case, if the user has certain permissions in Entra ID or has permissions to read files, then that agent uses those users' permissions to do those things. So an on behalf flow. He also has an autonomous app flow, which is for autonomous AI agents, so that you basically can give them permissions that only that AI agents can perform. Then the third flow is the digital colleague flow, called here, which is basically the agent user flow. So that agent user that we talked about at the bottom of the hierarchy, that has a specific flow and OAuth used to actually get access to resources as a normal user would do. So how does this look into the portal? If you go to the Entra ID portal, you will have something at the left-hand side, which is new. It's called Agent ID in preview. And then you will eventually see all of your agent identities in your tenant under the agent identities tab over here. As you can see, I have some agent identities in this tenant here, and for which you can see the name, the created on date, etc., if they are active or not. So if the agent identity is disabled. And this is actually a very interesting column that I always recommend adding, because this column is not enabled by default. You have to enable it by the choose columns button here at the top. And if you add this column into your view, you will see the property uses agent identity. If uses agent identity is set to yes, then you have an agent identity and the new agent identity form. So the agent ID form. If it is no, then it is a legacy service principal object that we talked about earlier. So I said the legacy agent identities, to call them that way, are just application registrations but used by an AI agent. If it is set to no, those are the older way of doing things with AI agents. With the new agent identities, there are a couple of governance policies that you can do. So first of all, you can assign an owner to an agent identity. An owner is basically a technical administrator, so someone that can handle operational and configurational aspects, like adding permissions to an agent identity, for example, or maybe blocking them or disabling them. It's also a bit the same as an owner on a regular application registration. So, in the owner concept, the user concept of application registrations is a bit the same here for an agent identity. The owner thingy is also only supported for agent identities, so not for agent users. Then the second one is sponsors, and this one is actually a required thing for all agent identities that you create, and it provides business accountability for the agents. So who is responsible for that agent or that agent identity, who knows what it does, for example, and all of those things. And so it's very important during security incidents, for example, that you can actually reach out to someone. And then the manager is basically the boss of an agent. And the organizational hierarchy, the agent also shows as it's reporting to a manager. And this is only supported for an agent user. If you look into the Entra ID portal, you can also see here the details of an agent identity here, RVDD security research, which is a normal agent identity. And here you can see that I am the sponsor of that agent identity. You actually are required to always set a sponsor. Owner is not required. As you can see, there is no owner here. If I assign an owner here, then this person can also disable this agent identity, for example, without having any Entra ID roles. An agent user then is just found under the users tab in Entra ID, just like you found normal users, but there is a tag, which you can see here, that it is an agent user account. So it's just a normal user, but with some specific properties, and you can see it in the Microsoft Entra GUI that it is an agent user and not a regular user account. So permissions, something I wanted to add here, because you can actually add or assign permissions to an agent identity so that an agent can, for example, send Teams messages or something else. And you can also add Entra roles to an agent identity in your tenant. The interesting here is that Microsoft limited the Entra roles supported for agents. So for example, you cannot assign global administrator to an AI agent. They restricted that, and only a couple of Entra ID roles are supported. The same goes for OAuth permissions. So there are 4 OAuth permissions that are specifically blocked for all agent identities, which are 4 very high privileged OAuth permissions. You can also assign other airbag permissions to your agent identities, like Azure roles or maybe things in SharePoint, for example, so that the agent identities can do things in other products as well. Assigning a permission can be done on an agent identity itself, but there is also something called permission inheritance. And here we actually assign permissions to an agent identity blueprint, so the governing body of an agent identity. And once an agent identity is created, you can actually set up that agent identity gets all of the same permissions as the agent identity blueprint. So in that way, you can say as an administrator, all of the agent identities for this product or application are allowed to do these things in my tenants. And if agent identities get created or deleted, they all get the same permissions always, and you don't have to do that afterwards anymore.
Robbe, how can you change the setting? So, for instance, I have 5 agents already done inheritance pattern. How can I switch one off? Or is it everything is off from the moment that you switching off the inheritance pattern?
So the inheritance thing is something that you first need to enable before it's You can do it basically. The other way around is something I actually didn't test yet. So in your scenario, if you enable it but then disable it, I'm not sure if it breaks the chain that already existed. That's something I actually have to test. It's an
Okay,
interesting
cool.
case. Yeah. As you can see here, again, the details of an agent identity. If you go to access identity access, you can always see here to which permissions the agent identity has, both in delegated and application permissions, for example. In this case, I didn't have any, but this is where you can find it. There is also something called the agent registry, which is basically a metadata repository for your AI agents, and it provides a unified view of all the deployed agents in your environment. That is both for Microsoft agents and non-Microsoft agents, for example. And it also allows other agents to discover each other and, for example, controls agent-to-agent communications. So you can say with the agent registry, these agents are allowed to discover each other and these, for example, not. If you look at how the agent registry is composed, it's basically a sort of database where you have an agent that gets an agent's instance. That agent instance get agent manifest cards, which then documents all of the skills, the publishers, the connections, etc. of that agent. So that way you can actually always find an agent, what it can do, who published it, and so forth. The agent registry is also now a thing in the admin portal. In the past, it was in the Entra ID portal, but now that Agent ID is becoming GA, they moved it to the admin portal. Then I want to talk about some of the protection mechanisms. Most of my research personally went into conditional access and identity protection. So these are the main things I wanted to talk about here. You can actually protect your AI agent identities with conditional access, and that applies for two scenarios. When an agent identity requests a resource token, so an agent identity to a resource, and then the second flow is when an agent user requests access to a resource. So both these two types of identities that an agent can have different scenarios in conditional access. Two specific flows that are not covered by conditional access is when an agent identity blueprint requests tokens to create an agent identity. That's not something that you can enforce with conditional access or put controls on. And when that same agent identity blueprint performs intermediate token exchange to eventually give tokens to an agent identity, that's also something that is not governed in conditional access.
Is it yet to come, or is it
No,
not at all
no, I don't
currently?
think so. I don't think so. It's rather a technical limit than something that's future that they are still building. Although I would like that the intermediate token exchange is something that they could govern with conditional access, because there are a couple of I can't call them vulnerabilities, but like you can misuse this in conditional access basically.
I
It's
agree.
something I have some slides for as well. So this is basically the same thing, but a graphical overview, the different authentication flows that are supported in conditional access and which are not. In conditional access, there are a couple of targets that you can set for agents. So you can say, I want to target all of my agent identities. I want to target specific agent identities. I want to target specific agent users. Or you can also target an agent identity blueprint principle. The cool thing with targeting an agent identity blueprint principle is that you can target all of the related agent identities that is governed with a blueprint as well. So if you, for example, want to block all agent identities related to an agent blueprint, you can just target the blueprint and then all of the agent identities behind that are blocked or something else as well. Which is cool. For example, if you have a compromise and you need to block 20 agent identities, you just block the agent blueprints. The important thing here is that if you do this, it does not target agent users behind those agent identities, which is, in my opinion, kind of a flaw in the design. I also wrote a blog post about it. Why? Because that's something that then you cannot do. If you want to block agent users in conditional access, you have to target them specifically. This is also where you can find it in conditional access. If you want to target your agent users or agent identities, you can see here the blueprint principles that you can select in conditional access. Entra ID identity protection is also supported for agents, which you can use to detect agent risk. So for example, unfamiliar resource access, sign-in spikes, failed access attempts. So basically a malicious agent or a compromised agent if you want to detect that one. This is how you can see that in identity protection. So this is the overview of, for example, confirmed compromised agents in this tenant, and how you can see the details of such a risk detection and identity protection. You can also combine these two, and this is where it becomes very powerful. You can create a conditional access policy targeting all your agent identities that are, for example, a high risk in your environment, and you can block those. So with this is a very powerful conditional access policy because you can block your compromised agents automatically with this system, basically. So that's a really nice feature to set up in your tenant. Something I want to briefly mention here is the network security for Copilot Studio agents. And there is a thing in Entra ID called Global Secure Access, which is a web content filtering gateway, etc. Also for Copilot Studios, you can now integrate that. So then you can restrict to which websites or website categories your AI agents are allowed to go. Just wanted to mention that here as well.
Cool.
And then the last part of the slide deck, so a couple of best practices and practical tips I already found in some environments. Again, it's still early stage, so a lot of new best practices are coming out every day. But first of all, why would you not use the legacy service principle or a normal application service principle for your AI agents? So the four main reasons are the platform restrictions on high privileged authorizations, which I mentioned earlier. So with an AI agent, the platform already restricts what an AI agent can do in your environment. Also, the enforced sponsorship is a very big plus in my opinion, because in security incidents at SOCs, we often see when an application is compromised, you don't always know who created the application or who is responsible for it. With an AI agent identity, you always know who is the sponsor, so who is responsible of that AI agent. Also, the blueprint managed credential and lifecycle instead of individual life cycles is very handy. So if you want to block a couple of agents, you just do it on the blueprints, and also the credentials are covered by the blueprints. So that's a much easier setup. And also the support for ephemeral agent identities. So inheritable permissions through the blueprint allows for agent deletion of after a specific task, basically. So if I want to create an agent and I want to have that agent automatically have the right permissions, that's something that you can do on the fly without having to always consent that specific permission for each creation. Agent identity creation channels. Yeah, there are a couple of ways on how to create all of those identities that I'm talking about. For example, via the admin center or via the Graph API, CLI, PowerShell. But an important thing here is that they can be created from Microsoft product integrations as well, and from Entra ID consent experience. And this is actually the bottom two are the two channels that I see in practice are the most dangerous for agent identity sprawl, because these are the channels where normal users or non-admin users, if I can call them that way, are allowed to sometimes create agent identities, and then you open up your portal and you see that you have 1,000 agent IDs and you didn't do anything as an admin yet. So those are the two most dangerous channels that you maybe want to control. Focusing on the product integrations is Microsoft Copilot Studio, Security Copilot, and Azure AI Foundry, the three products of Microsoft that can automatically create agent identities. And the Microsoft Copilot Studio one is actually the one that is responsible for most of the agent identities in the environments I see in practice. Here, the governance, access management, and security controls of all of these products become very important, because you want to know who can create those agents, who can create my identities, and so on. The hard thing with this is that all of these products have their own access management and own governance and own security controls. So
Exactly.
that's a tough one for administrators, because you need to know all of those products. App consent policies was the second one that was important to check, because here you have your user consent policies that we know for regular applications. Those apply for agent identities as well. So if you now allow user consent, then some users might consent to third-party agent identities without you knowing it. A big recommendation from my side is using the Defender XDR agent inventory and the Microsoft Defender stack, because then you can actually get a complete overview of all of your agents running in your environments, not only in Microsoft environments like Copilot Studio and Azure Foundry, but also a couple of other ones that are already supported. And if you go into the security portal and go to the AI agents tab over here, you can actually see your complete overview of all of your AI agents living across the different platforms with the links to their agent identities. And why I find this so important is because an agent name, like in Copilot Studio, does not always equal the agent identity name and Entra ID. And that's the hard thing for an administrator. My users create 100 agents in Copilot Studio, for example, but all of the 100 agents get the same name, agent or agent one. And then as an admin, you don't know anymore which agent identity is now linked to the agent in Copilot Studio, for example. To solve this, you use that AI agent inventory in Defender XDR, like I told earlier. And then you can actually create KQL queries to correlate your Copilot Studio agent IDs to the Entra ID object IDs. So then you can link this agent ID or identity is linked to this agent user in my Copilot Studio. And here you can see, for example, right, we have an agent name and agent and Copilot Studio called Agent ID Researcher. And if I actually see what's the agent identity name, it's called Agent One and Entra ID. So here you can couple them together as an administrator and actually know what is what. Without this feature in Defender XDR enabled, you will not be able to find that basically. You can also do some enrichments like, is this an agent identity? Is this an agent user? Or is it maybe an application identity still, which is legacy form? Those are all things that you can find in this agent repository. Remediation is the last part. So what if an agent is compromised? How do you remediate that? You can or disable the object in Entra ID, so an agent user disabling, or for example, disabling an agent identity. Two different portals where you need to do it, but both can be disabled in this case. You can also disable the blueprint principle altogether. So if you disable the blueprint principle, it will not be able to create new agent identities, but it will also not be able to create new tokens for that agent identities. So then you can remediate all of them in once. You can also do blocking and conditional access using identity protection. Like I said earlier, so an agent is in risk, for example, and then I can automatically block it with a conditional access policy. Then you just need to confirm the agent compromise as an administrator or maybe via an automated process, and then they are blocked.
Exactly. People need to know, right?
Yeah,
Otherwise, they are
yeah,
stuck in the confusion. It's
yeah,
not.
definitely. I created a blog post which we will add into the references, but there is a flowchart that I created in which cases should I do a object block or should I use a conditional access policy block? Because like I said earlier, and if you, for example, block a blueprint principle, then the agent user is not automatically blocked. So then you have to disable those as well. So this is basically a flowchart that you can use. In which cases do I need to, do my remediation. And that's actually it. So this was a introduction into the agent identity platform of Entra ID, some fundamentals, how it works, and the things I learned from it, and some best practices.
Great to have these lessons learned, your deep dive investigation, sharing your story with us. Very helpful and very curious when you are further in the process. And maybe I can invite you back for a great demo in showcasing how this functionality is working.
Yeah, definitely. We're doing some research with a couple of people still on everything. We really want to get to the bottom of this, to say it like that. And when we do, I can always come back and give some extra insights.
Yeah, awesome. That will be great. Thank you for sharing your story. Also, in showcasing some best practices already. I think that is also stuff to dive into ourselves and see the possibilities in how we can block specific events. But very helpful, and we will share all the links which you have shown. So thank you very much for that.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Of course, for everybody at home, thanks for listening. If you have any thoughts or comments, please leave them below. And otherwise, I would say take care. Till next time.